Good evening and good morning. Welcome to wherever you are on this planet. This is Rick introducing the Bongversation episode number 25, which is in brackets number 7, on
Mm-hmm.
on my 16th, which is number 7 on Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
Dave's on 15,
Yep.
till for not for much longer. And tonight today we're going to be talking about Severance. Severance. So Dave, what did you think of the first 3 episodes of Severance, the TV show, Apple TV show?
Yeah. Who are you? Who are you? That's how
Yeah,
it
exactly.
opens, right?
Yeah,
Hello.
yeah,
So the
yeah.
idea of Helly. Now you notice that the first character you run into is Helly, the girl with the just
Red
obvious
hair.
fake red hair, and so
Yeah,
that's really also the idea of the lady in the red dress idea. It's like the idea of this character now is going to be the one that you follow into the story. And then
yeah,
it just so happens that you don't know it at the moment, but when the speaker who's talking to this Helly character finds herself, just on a table waking up in a conference room basically, and the speaker's asking her who is she?
who
Who
are
are
you?
you? Who
Yeah,
are you twice?
yeah, yeah.
And what happens after what what's interesting about that is the character who's speaking on or doing the interview or trying to talk winds up being the next character you're introduced to, which is named Mark.
Mark, yeah.
Who yeah, so you're introduced to
Mark
him
S.
out. Yeah,
Mark S. Yeah,
yep.
he's got an S at the end. Yeah.
Yep. So you run into him out in the parking lot where he's series, but he lives in Bard Creek, which is housing for Lumen Corporation. Bard is also the idea of a storyteller, or
The
yeah,
the
yep.
Shakespearean bard. Yeah,
And the creek is the
interesting.
idea of the flowing water, or so it's going to be. It's a flowing idea which is going to be presented to you. So it's like it's going to have twists and turns because you're dealing with. You don't know it at the moment, but you're dealing with the idea of what's called to be severed, or have your mind split, meaning
Yeah.
that you and when Mark goes in. You notice there's something weighing on him. He's not in a great mood. He takes the David Duchovny school of fake crying. So it looks like he's trying. It's terrible. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, he's just the worst fake crier. But besides David Duchovny, he takes the cake for. He looks like he's trying to do something else when he's trying to cry.
Well,
So
it's got archetypes of X
yeah,
Files, what we
right,
talk about as well. So here you go.
yeah, yeah. So he's showing up at Lumen, and what I noticed about Lumen was just we talked about Lumen just the other week, especially
Yeah.
because Lumen's a character in Dexter season 5 who winds up being a woman who winds up wanting to be with him and as a love interest, but also a work interest on both
Mm.
sides of the coin. Remember? So then
And the new season of Dexter's come out exactly the same time as Severance.
yeah, yep.
Mm.
So then you have this idea. And his address is 34 in Bard Creek
Number
7.
7.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's quite so. Oh, and so the first episode, the first 3 episodes, you have good news about hell. That's the first one, and hell is not only the idea of where they wind up figuring or where you're going to see they are, but also the idea of the Helly character and that character following in it. The second was called a half loop, which is the idea of a half a loop would be a 180 degrees, or the idea of turning around. And then uh, what is the third one? In perpetuity. There you go. There you go. The
Yeah.
idea of lasting forever, or being, as long as you remember or you are remembered, you last forever. So if you later in the series, we'll talk about it here in a little bit, when they're in one of in the halls looking at the some of the luminaries, one of the quotes on the wall is, a remembered man does not decay, or the
Yes.
idea of history living in us whether we learn it or not.
Yeah.
those are
Yeah.
those are
Yeah,
so those
they're everywhere.
uh,
Those but in the offices, you
uh-huh
see these signs with a lumen quote from one of their
Right.
luminaries, I guess, whatever they call them.
Yeah,
Yeah,
one of their founders, or
mm.
one of their CEOs through time, because they have a hall where you go in, where it's going to have, as you stand before it, it's going to give you the history of this CEO and what and their different ideas at the past. So it's very 1984ish.
Oh yeah,
As far as one scene when one of the orienters or one of the assistant managers of the Severance floor, as it turns out, he winds up being a guy called Seth Milchick. Now, Seth is the idea of the third son, or the idea of the first. So then it's the idea you have Cain and Abel, then you
yeah.
have Seth being the third, or the idea of the three. So then that idea of what course to take. So you don't know if Seth is where his motives are at first, because he's pretending to be this nice character, but he's always behind the scenes plotting, or as you can tell as you watch the show, that at certain levels characters are aware of their other, or their what's called an outie. You have an
Mm-hmm.
innie and an outie, so you have an inner character which works at Lumen once you're severed,
Well,
and we
yeah,
should
once
go
you're
into that.
seven, yeah.
Yeah.
Once so
And
you go basically they've had a chip inserted in the back of their head into their
yeah,
brain,
yeah,
and when they go through the lift, which always points downwards, you notice it's a triangle which points down. So
correct,
they're going it's a triangle which points down. So
correct.
they're going down. They're not going
Yep,
up.
yep.
So and the fact you got the Hell character, Helly character, and
Hmm.
often I spotted in that very, I think episode 2, when she's standing, or episode 1, where she's standing, she blocks out the E. It says welcome Helly, but you only see
Hmm.
welcome hell,
Yep.
and yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's the name of the first episode, or very close to Good News in Hell. And what's interesting about the Good News is several times throughout the show, Jesus is mentioned in a way that's not. Uh, I'll put up some
Complimentary.
screenshots, but it's the idea that if you look at Jesus and the idea of the seven, particularly Mark 7. So let's deal with the main character, Mark, and deal with 7. What there's a couple ideas in Mark 7, particularly if you look at there's nothing from without a man that's entering into him can defile him, but the things which come out of him
Yeah,
that defile him. So it's the idea of not what you take in, it's what comes out of you. So if you then observe all, it's only then what you without direction put back out that can defile you, or meaning that you then lie to your neighbor, X, Y, or Z. And then so you also have the idea of the false honor, and this also goes to this character, because Mark 7:6 is these people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. So it's
yeah,
the idea of this false face, or this false support. And that, in this case, this Seth character, who plays the deputy manager of the Sever floor, it plays that role. And so he is one that you run into at what would be called kind of your orientation day, and quite literally breaks you of the habit of trying to escape, because after Helly goes through the severance procedure, because you you get to see the procedure. It's kind of nasty, but it's really just sticking an implant into the brain, which then severs the innie and the outie. And when you get in the helicopter, or the elevator, when you go back up to the ground floor from the basement, or the perceived hell, you see this time warp, and the character now becomes the outie character, which cannot remember anything the other one does.
that's
So
right.
so they don't know anything about that life. So what I found interesting about that, Rick, is that even happens in modern day, where people claim to have, and you see it. They have this work personality, and then they have when they're off, they seem to be a different person. They
Yeah,
they they act like a character at work, and it's quite ridiculous.
it's the truth though, isn't it?
Yeah,
And that's why I've never ever been able to comprehend anyone that can work in an office. To
right.
me, it's like it's completely against my whole. There's something bad about it, and
it's an act, man.
Yeah, yeah, you're
It's an
portraying
act,
someone else. You're portraying the corporation,
yeah.
and you'll say what you have to say and do what you have to do to move up the ranks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
yeah, with this Mark character, so you kind of meet this Helly character who you already know is going to be the redhead or the idea of temptation, meaning she's going to be causing trouble.
Chaos.
Yeah, chaos. So then you have the Mark character whose name is Mark Scout, Mark S, like you pointed out. Mark Scout. Now the Scout is the idea of someone who is exploring, who's looking ahead, who then is given clues and then tries to find out what those clues mean. And now the idea of Mark within the Lumen office in the basement. He's quite the happy-go-lucky kind of guy. Kind of he not real, corporate guy, but also shows up to work on time. So so he also has a couple of workmates. One named Dylan George or Dylan G, and the other guy is Irving B. And Irving B is like the company corporate man, knows all the rules, loves all nine, implements of their policy.
The 9 implements. I love that too. It was 9 implements, and he quotes them.
He's like, so
John
then
Turturro, John Turturro, great character actor.
Yeah, John Turturro plays him, and then you have the other guy, Dylan George, who's played by Zach Cherry. He is more of this. You can tell he's competent because he wins all the little goofy prizes like the finger traps and the waffle parties and the erasers.
It's interesting that you picked up the name's Dylan George, because the main archetype that I pick up off the show is the Seinfeld. You've got the four characters. You've got Irving, it could be a dead ringer for Kramer. Same worry here. You've got Helly is playing the Elaine character.
Yep.
You got
George Costanza.
George Costanza, and that is the character. He's like a black version of George Costanza with a beard. Same facial movements, same everything, and obviously Jerry's being the Mark S character.
Mark Scout.
Mark Scout.
Yeah.
So there's definitely they definitely got that in my head. I picked that up straight away. Like, it reminds me of Seinfeld.
For sure.
There's 4 characters. Yeah.
Well, notice Ben Stiller is one of the revelation.
He's the main director of the whole.
Yeah, he's also the kind of the money man behind it. Now, Ben Stiller is the idea of if you go, like, just for example, just so nobody's confused, these are all it's all just Masonic play act, and the idea of the Ashkenazi Jew troop or the tribe, those characters. Even if you go to his movie like Dodgeball in 2004, his costume is purple and he has a big G, in the center of his belly. So and the 3 is the G is the 7. So these are all the different same characters, but also they're called a comedian. But if you look at what these type of comedians, quote unquote, talk about, what the subject matter is, it's all like bathroom humor, and it's all
it's degrading.
It's all degrading type of humor. So while they're carnival clowns, but they also are when they put out a more serious show like this. There is a lot of comedy in there, especially with the Dylan George character. The way he just has these outbursts.
He does, and he's got that, and he's constantly got his mouth open with the same "what the fuck" type of what he's always saying. And there's another link then with Stiller and Jerry Stiller. Jerry Stiller being the Seinfeld's George Costanza's father in the episode. So there's definitely a link with Seinfeld.
So it's very similar. It's like a song or anything else where there's a certain tone or dynamic that works for storytelling. And if you add too many characters too fast, some will get lost. However, there's also the idea that you have to have a certain amount of diversity within scripting to keep people interested. Otherwise, it will seem too one or two dimensional. Will bore people, and
Yeah.
so then you start to see these layers start to be these characters added, and then also you start to see like a shadow come in or a darkness come in, and where that happens is in the idea when they're given these jobs, and it looks like they're just playing Minecraft.
It
Is
looks
what it,
like Minecraft
yeah,
or Sudoku.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
all numbers on
yeah,
these now. The screen, everything's retro. There's nothing that you
yeah,
can identify in that show as being today. Yet it is. But the screens are all old. Look like Apple, the old Apple, the old
right, with
IBM
the big bubble
computer screen,
screen.
bubble screen,
Yeah,
black and white. Doesn't seem to have, and the animations on the episode, which they have, are really basically 1980s animations, like really
right,
poor quality animations. It's just brilliant. And the cars they drive on their outies are
yeah.
all what I call 1980s Ladas. They look like Russian Polish cars. There's nothing that you would say this is modern. You can't tell. It's a complete
Yeah,
time warp
yeah,
into that
it's very
that show.
gray as far as what year it would take place.
Yeah.
It has a dystopian feel for sure. And
Mm.
before I jump back to the idea of Lumen, I want to go to you mentioned the computer screen and the numbers, where all the numbers, like I said, they're going to be 0 through 9. That's
Yeah.
just the way it is. And also, if you remember when Helly grabs her first scary numbers group,
Yes.
because remember what they were looking for is scary numbers, and this is very important because the group she carries, or she when the Irving character asks her, can you put a border around it, basically she says, yes, I can see the boundary, can you put a boundary? When she grabs it and starts to drag it, here's the numbers that are in that group: 369, but it's in 936. So the 369. The
Yeah.
next
Yeah.
row is 005. Then you have 1441. So you have the idea of when all that is said and done, you have the idea of the 357. If you look at it in kind of magic squares, because that's what all this stuff is. It's all
Yeah.
magic squares. So if you look at that, then you have the 30 on top. You have the 9 plus the 1 plus the 4, which is your 14, 5. That's your senses. So your ring, senses, and you have the 6, the 5, the 4, and the 1, which equals 16 or 7. So the ring of senses become mine. And she says, oh, that's scary. That's a scary number. Guess what numbers
Yes.
are in there? 311, 911, 611. Do you see? Do you now? If their job, now I'm only going to the third. I'm going to put some, uh, I'm going to add some ideas to where I think that they're going. That doesn't mean they're necessarily going to go there, because I've only watched to the third part. But I notice in their job, if their job is to remove scary numbers,
Which is what it is.
yeah,
Yeah.
let's talk about then what that means and how that relates to not only Lumen, but Bell Laboratories. All right. So first, just to continue with the numbers, that means that if I can remove all stories that deal with 311, COVID, 911, 9/11, 2001 New York, that idea, and all
Yeah.
the added and everything that goes with that, the 611, the different stories that go with those dates, then guess what? All of a sudden, the world seems at peace. There is no war. So then the
Oh
idea
my
of the
God!
one world,
Everything,
yeah,
Dave. Those numbers encompass every major psychological operation
yeah,
ever that
yeah.
we can name the last 60 years.
So then Helly takes that group of numbers and trashes it, puts it in the bin number one. I found that very interesting, because what I then said was, if that is the case, then when the so-called New World Order takes over, and you have this introduction of a peacekeeper, a leader who brings peace, quite literally, all of this news that's being produced by a computer, by so-called AI, that's feeding these numbers, simply changes its output. Now
Yeah.
And that's through what's called negative feedback transmission, which we'll talk about in a minute. But that then happens, and now all of a sudden the world seems at peace when it always was. However,
Yeah.
people were reading newspapers and being convinced it wasn't. And
Exactly,
now,
man.
simply with a flip of a switch, everyone's,
It's
now
gone.
it's doing fine. And who's going to listen to the guy who says, no, listen, you were being lied to, you know? Because they fell in love with that group of numbers. So now let's talk about Bell Labs, if you don't mind, in so-called real life. Bell Labs is the idea of lumen. Now, lumen, if you notice that there's in their corporate logo, there's instead of there's looks like a bulb, but instead of being turned up like a light bulb, it's turned around in the shape of a bell jar or a jar. Now, the idea of a bell jar, just so you know, is within the occult type of field. It's for the containment of not only ideas. It can contain a spirit. It can contain a power. It can be the idea of the genie. All right, the genie in the bottle. The idea of the bell jar. So then the bell jar is going to go back to Bell Labs, which there's a couple. This is very interesting to once you hear this. So in 1925, Bell Labs, and this would be in so-called real life, the history that's put out for the company Bell Labs. In 1925, there's two interesting outputs that they gave or put out to the world. One was the sound recording, and two was the concept called quality control. The reason, sound recording is interesting in that it allows people to listen to sound being that was recorded and then played back, so that they that's what that's about. But the quality control is the idea. If you jump all the way to the current idea of the show we're talking about, the quality control is the idea of controlling numbers.
And that's what they do. That is their position, and that is exactly what they do. They control numbers. And
So it's the idea of causing a template to be reformed. So no matter what so-called man or woman you put in that position, the template doesn't change. The quality control stays the same because the person adapts to the control, not to their idea of a control or their opinion of a control. Right?
Wow.
So now let's keep going. In 1926, this same company, Bell Labs, comes out with the idea of thermal noise or how to sense it, let's say, or to measure it, and the idea of antenna arrays. Now, the idea of antenna arrays, now that gets into HARP and all kinds of other things down the road. It also gets into radio telescopes and all kinds of other ideas. So, but the idea of thermal noise is not only the idea of noise that's audible noise, but thermal noise being that through friction it causes heat and has a heat signature. That you see a lot of that now, kind of in a related field with thermal cameras and things like that.
Oh,
but
yeah, they're even using it at the moment, Dave. There was a big image the other day saying that the Earth's heating up so much, and they're using the thermal camera over the top of Sydney, and they're showing all the areas where it's cooler and where the trees are. But they're using thermo imaging.
Do they say the winner is?
The paper. Yeah, the winner is Sydney. That literally are using that imagery right now on the mainstream media. The thermo cameras, old technology, obviously.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
It's actually in the new media cycle right now.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Well, yeah. Everything is just I did a short video one time to kind of show how this works, and I had a perfectly calm pond in front of me, and I threw a rock into the center, and the waves were coming back to the camera and going away from the camera and to the side, left and right, and I said, this is the idea of time, and it's also the idea that you talked about last week about rhymes. Although the wave is not the same, the story is the same.
Yeah.
So then Yeah, so you have this 1920. Now we're moving up to 1927. I like to give two little inventions supposedly from this Bell Labs, because I'm going to get up to 1947 and then cross over into like the idea which you already know about. You can probably already sense it. So you have the negative feedback transmission, and you have, guess what else comes out in 1927? You have the negative feedback, which is the idea of this negative, that group of numbers, negative feelings, negative ideas being put into you, you kicking it back, it being pushed back to you, you kicking it back, and it pushed back until you accept it. It's a negative feedback transmission. And guess what else comes out in 27 from Bell Labs but the television transmission?
Far out, man.
Do you notice how each one of these, they marry to each other? The ideas are married? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's keep going then. What's
wow,
important to have a television
stuff, man. This is gold class stuff, man. You keep spitting it out.
Yeah, no worries. So a couple more for 27, then we're going to get to a little fun turn. So in two more for 1927. You have the transatlantic telephone idea, and that's from Bell Lab. That's the idea, because if you're looking to spread a story or to move a population, mankind of minds, that you have to talk to people, you have to be in communication with them, and the wider that communication is, the better. That's why. And then you also have, in the same year, wearable hearing aids. That's because, here's the thing about it's important. As soon as, if you're going to be watching these shows or TV shows or even news,
programs,
and you're watching it to explain to people what to look at it, it's best to watch the especially the little news clips without sound, without listening to it, because you actually then see what you see. You're not listening to what they're telling you see.
Exactly. So your subconscious is being focused on one thing, and your conscious is focusing on one thing when you remove the sound. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So you have the hearing aids then allows that whole other group, the so-called grandfathers and all that, grandmothers, to then hear. And then guess what happens when little Jimmy sits on Grandpappy's knee? And because you actually then see what you see. You're not listening to what they're telling you see.
Exactly. So your subconscious is being focused on one thing, and your conscious is focusing on one thing when you remove the sound. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So you have the hearing aids then allows that whole other group, the so-called grandfathers and all that, grandmothers, to then hear. And then guess what happens when little Jimmy sits on Grandpappy's knee and Grandpappy tells him a story? Oh, Grandpappy would never lie to me. Well, yeah, he would.
I love it.
Yeah. So now let's go to the turn, the old mix, and this is where people will put together the idea of one and the other. In 1947, you have the idea of Bell Labs, or on the 23rd of December, they demonstrated the transistor. Now the transistor is the idea of an emitter, a base, and a collector. All right, and or dots are light. It's the idea of a switch, very very fast switch. The idea, think of that, but just in the idea of light, a light and a dark. Think of a dotted line. Now, an emitter is the idea of a charge carrier. Now, a charge carrier is also the idea of realizing a charge. All right. So then think of this not only in the physical space of what a transistor does for computers and the idea, but in your mind or man's mind, when they realize that's the emitter. Now then, what's the next part of the transistors? There's three parts. The base. The base then is what controls the flow. The base then is, what is someone based in? What have they based their thought in? What have they decided to actually, and if it's a lie, it's the idea of being debased. When you allow yourself to be debased, debased by a false idea. So then, what is their base? Again, what's another word for base but foundation? What idea or what foundation do they set on? That's the second part of that transistor. The third part is the idea of the collector. Now that's collecting of charge carriers. All right. So then what is the collector but someone or the idea of the collector? Now that's collecting of charged carriers. All right. So then what is the collector but someone or the idea of the mind who separates then collects fallen ideas or false ideas or idols. The idea of nines, 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 nines.
9999,
Yeah,
which is 666. It's upside
it
down.
sure is.
Yeah. Inverted inversion. Yeah, for
It
sure.
sure is. Remember in that group of numbers that was pulled over by heli, the 611 was in there, the 911, the 311.
Yeah,
It's all in there. So then you also have the idea of the nine. If you push the nine over, like just imagine a nine standing there. That's an idol. It's standing there and the zero on top. It just you push it over, and then guess what happens? It just rolls, becomes 6, rolls, 9, rolls, rolls, rolls. Do you see? And then it starts to become a 69, or the idea of a cancer. The idea of a cancer, or what then is eating up, or the man or the woman in their mind. What's eating their mind? It's the idea of information theory, which comes out
yeah,
in 1948 from Bell Labs. Information theory is the idea of if from Bell Labs. Information theory is the idea of if you're seeking something, you shall find it. Just like with Matthew 7, we're talking about 7, the idea of severance, or 7, the idea of mind. In Matthew 7, you have the idea that ask and it will be given to you, seek and you will find, knock and the door will be opened.
yeah,
Do you see? So that's
yeah.
the idea of information. So then guess what else happened? Let's jump back, go back to 1947. That's the same year in July, earlier in the year, July 7th, because the news release came out on the 8th. So I'm putting the event that's being reported on the 7th is the Roswell hoax.
Well, I was going to say Roswell, 100%.
Yeah.
That's incredibly.
Yeah.
And so there's a kind of going tangent here, but there is a connection to me when I watch Severance of Scientology and the whole the mantras and the things like that, and the way that the way that they're controlled by Milchick and the other ones, whatever. There's
right.
They have someone that they have to report to from the base up to. We will. I don't know if we're going to see who the actual big bosses are. Right. Maybe we will. But there's definitely a and so 1947 Roswell, you had those weird things going on with L. Ron Hubbard's crew, and the Jack Parsons, etc.
Right, and
Crowley,
Crowley.
It's all ties in.
Yep. So then, and also you have the idea, Rick, that you say. People are going to ask, because in 58 they come out with the laser, in 69 they come out with Unix OS, although that in 1956 IBM already had the 704, which was the idea of kind of an original input-output computer. But so then people will start asking, where did all this come from all of a sudden, and how's it all coming from one place? Well, then you come up with you put out a side story. You put out this idea that it went everywhere. More people think that UFOs exist because of the silly nonsense of a Roswell.
Yeah. So that's a complete disinformation. Again, tying in with the X-Files and everything.
Yeah.
Clearly, exactly. You're hitting some really important stuff here. My mind's going. I'm getting all these ticks as you're talking into my. And I mean tick with a green tick with a. Inflection going upwards, not a tick that's taking my blood. A good tick. So you're hitting some home runs here, Dave.
Yeah. Big so time. Guess what happened in 1948? The next year they have the Aztec hoax, where they claim that they found 16 humanoid bodies. 16. 6 + 1 is 7. That hoax, that's called the Aztec hoax, and that came out the next year, and that kind of led to the idea that the government's holding bodies, and that leads into Area 51 and all kinds of stuff. And then guess what? There's another story because what happens is this is the idea of a negative feedback transmission I told you about in 27 with the TV. People aren't going to buy the story right away, so you keep feeding it back to them. So in 1980, you had the Barnett legend. Oh, Grady, Barney Barnett. and he had this old group of archaeology students that went ahead and claimed they found this, that, and the other thing. So then they put out a book, and as soon as a book's put out, all of a sudden people say,
You
"Oh,
go
well,
and
there's a book." It was called the Roswell Incident by Charles Berlitz. It was
Berlitz,
such
that's
a
right. And the
name.
same guy that did now. The same guy. He also did the Bermuda Triangle.
Yeah,
It's there's another
yeah,
triangle imagery which you're going to get
yeah,
on Severance. You're going to see the triangle
yeah.
all the time. It's a big image on in the show. But yeah, Charles Berlitz's one of his biggest books was the Bermuda Triangle, which is a hoax, guaranteed,
Oh yeah.
100%.
Oh, guaranteed. Well, here's one of the first lines which I found interesting in the first episode, because I kind of blend them all together, and is that when the Mark character talks to Helly at the beginning, he's like, every time you find yourself here, you chose to be here.
You exactly.
Yeah, so it's like you decided to come to work. You decided to do that. You chose to do that. So then that's really a lesson even today when people are.
Well, and that changes her mind when he says that to her.
Mm-hmm.
It's a revelation. Like, oh, maybe my outie wants to be here, so I should accept
Right.
where I am. Yeah,
It's like a form of gaslighting for sure.
it is.
It's that
Well, it
same.
is. Yeah, big
Yes,
time.
that
And it's
same
being used.
idea.
Yeah, and it's being used on us all the time anyway. And you hear that with the Gnostics.
Yep.
That you chose to come here at this time. You chose to come here. This is a Gnostic
Mm-hmm.
mantra, or there's a lot of so-called truth types say that you came here to be here right now.
Well, these are this whole idea of lumen, the whole idea of the
The
real
light.
life, the whole real life, is the light. But also with the idea of it being in a bell jar configuration, the idea of like a drop instead of raised up like a bulb is the idea of a containment, and the idea of the anti-light containment. Also, they work in the what's called macro data refinement. Now, macros, as you know, is the idea of if it's a single instruction that expands automatically into a set of instructions. So you can create a click. For example, when I created a macro on a lot of the sputtering machines when I worked at Western Digital, what I had the macro do is all somebody had to do is click the macro, and it would execute a series of instructions, which would then take the current list of what was called production recipes, and it would upload it to the server, and then it would then move a file to the archive. It would do that automatically because this was kind of before when you had to make kind of things user friendly. So that's what I did was I wrote a macro. Now a macro sounds just like a daemon, doesn't it? Because a daemon, DAEMON, is an instruction that happens without the input of the user, meaning it happens in the background. It'll execute, and it will perform a task without you clicking the mouse or telling it to happen. So that's the only difference. So then you notice that the macro vision. So then where is the interaction in this case? Why isn't this a daemon DAE, and why these individuals, these so-called man and women, are being used, although they're severed, so they don't really have an idea. They're quite childish because of the different toys you see that they're given for rewards.
Oh
the
my
finger
God!
trap and
finger traps and really strange ceremonies, like when you do if you hit the right amount of bad words, numbers that they bring out like watermelon. It seems
you get the watermelon.
They have a watermelon party, and they all sit there and they turn the lights up. And when I was watching, I was going, "This is the Prisoner." To me, it's the Prisoner 1968. All over it. There's so much in the show, and I've watched it. Well, I've watched all of them. So I've got the first series, and I'm halfway through the second series that comes out every Friday. It's probably about 9 o'clock in the morning, I would say, or 9:11 in the morning. I'm not sure when it gets released, but the imagery. So if you go back to truthmeets.com and listen to the episodes 1 to 22 of Bongversations, you're going to hear us discussing The Prisoner 1967-68 with Patrick McGoohan.
Mm-hmm.
And so go backwards, if you those out there that are listening to this stuff. There's 22 episodes on truthmeets.com where you're going to hear where we're getting to now. Because this show, when I started watching it, my youngest son, because he said, "Dad, you're going to like the show," and I went, listen, I don't watch TV. So I went and sat down, and I was going, well, there's stuff here, and I was going, and the subconscious was going, Dave J's going to find this show very interesting, because I was just watching those numbers and the patterns and the imagery, and I thought, like, I know what I can see, but I always know there's going to be someone that can see a lot more. And I'm talking to him right now, and he's doing it. Yeah.
Well, thank you. Yeah, so some of the rooms also, some of the rooms I've been introduced to so far in the first 3 episodes is I'm aware of the orientation room where you first wind up. Then you have the macro data refinement office. There's the idea of, I want to get to this as well, but you have the security office, the elevator lobby, optics and design. I'm in the office, but of course I've been introduced already to Burt Goodman, which is Christopher Walken.
Christopher Walken, who plays, one of the greatest character actors ever. He plays a fantastic role as a guy in a different room, a different set of. They're doing they're restoring old artworks, basically.
Yeah, it's called the head of. He's optics and design. They call that.
Optics and design. Okay.
And it's a 2-person crew, and actually the lady who plays his helper is pretty good too. She's a good kind of, you know how you have body actors.
Yeah.
People who aren't talking, but they're in the scene moving, and just the way they move.
They don't need to. Yeah. So and look at the hairstyles on these women.
Yeah.
It's 1970s. It's 1960s. It's like weird perms and strange curls. I was just going. I knew what I was watching. There's so much in this show compacted, but it's very hypnotic. The color now. There's colors. Every scene you're watching will have blues and browns, or greens and browns, blues and Bongversations. Has already been introduced to the colours and numbers and tones. Well, guess what? You're going to get an overload of this one, because, my goodness gracious me, it's everywhere.
Oh, yeah. So then check this out, Rick. So then remember with the character of Walken, who's playing Burt Goodman, and the other guy, Irving. Irving. Now they meet in the wellness waiting room, and they're then discussing a painting. And there's something there between those two that's kind of a little homo-ish.
No, it's 100%. So I'll just give you a little bit of a spoiler alert. They're both gay, and so they're both.
I got that. I sensed that just from the interaction.
Well, episode 5 or 6 introduces that they're both homosexual.
I see.
You
know what's interesting about that is that there was this other show called Evil, where I talked to you about it last week, where it's got the atheist lady who's the psychologist, the kind of the ex or the lapsed Muslim who plays the scientific mind, and
that's
then
right. We were talking about last week.
The priest who's in training, who's actually in season 3, episode 1, they're doing this. It's also kind of X-File-ish. They're observing an experiment to test the weight of a body to see if the soul has weight. And what happens is they put in this one kind of this old fuddy-duddy type of priest who's they put him in the chamber, right? And he gives up the ghost, and guess what? He then all of a sudden jumps up revived. He's like, "Hey, I'm feeling great." And he starts, he becomes this completely different person. And there's this idea of that he doesn't now then have a soul. So then he gets off, and he the first thing he does is kisses a dude on the mouth.
Oh dear.
Is right out of the gate. And then what happened is he was a so-called father, a priest, and then the other priest, of this church, they had to then separate those two because they were going to of this church. They had to then separate those two because they were going to go bump uglies. You know, if they kept them together, it was going to be nut to butt. So so they split them up, and I just found it was quite interesting that it was the same. I felt the same dynamic was happening, although I haven't seen the scene. And what was interesting about the painting they were looking at, though, if you notice, it's like this god character with the cat of nine tails type of idea, whipping a group of four.
Yeah, that's
now
it. So that, exactly. So so there's all these rumors that Dylan is the guy that seems to hear all the gossip. The George character, that's George Costanza, 100% George Costanza.
Yep.
And
100%.
he is the guy. So he's constantly saying, "I've heard about this one of the other rival sections in this Lumen factory came and executed a whole group of four of them." And he's saying, "Could it be us? Are they talking about us?" So
did you notice that one of the characters was a clown?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I found most interesting about that. It was that these characters were four. Remember, because I did a video, 4 becomes 1, the idea of let there be light and there was light, 4 becomes 1. So then you have this idea of the 4 getting whipped by the 1, and then the 4, because the 4 was trying to become the 1. So the 4 is the idea of lumen. Now what's interesting so what's interesting about that is that those two meet outside, what did they call that room? The wellness center.
The wellness center, yeah.
So then, what I found interesting about the wellness center is when they get into the wellness center, the character sits down. The Irving character sits down in front of Miss Casey, who's this Asian counselor, and with very sultry. So you already have this.
Notice this imagery and the sultriness and the tones. Yeah. Everything gives you this kind of. There's so much stuff in here, but you picked up on it obviously with 3 episodes. You're gonna be blown out of the water with this show when you watch the rest of them. Let me tell you now.
So Miss Casey, who's very sultry, there's which I haven't got to obviously, but she's obviously going to show up again. And
yes, there is.
But did you notice how when she's speaking with Irving, what it is you get 100 points and you get or 90 points, I'm sorry, and you get 10 off every time you show emotion.
That's right.
Or you act, or you like one answer above the other answer. And what she does is she'll open up this folder and say, "Oh, your outie character is all these," and she'll start to read off all these different characteristics of your other self, and they're all very positive, and they're meant to elicit pride. And then once pride is shown, you're then you get your points deducted.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? So pride is one of the 7 deadly sins.
Yeah, and check this out. And then if you lose all your points, you wind up going to the break room. And the break room is where it uses what's called reconditioning. It has you read a statement over and over and over again.
It's straight out of 1984, and it's the Ministry of Love.
Yep.
Is it room number 9, which is the room that no one wants to go into in the Ministry of Love, where Winston's the very last room where he gets tortured. It's exactly everything in it is we've done 1984 on Bongversation,
right?
One of the episodes, but people.
Room 101 is that one.
Room 101, which is 11, or 2 or whatever.
Yeah, 2 is the idea of concern. So then if you notice then when they go into the break room in here that they get the light in their face and they're reading the screen. So they're reading this prompt through a screen, but they're fighting also a light being shown in their eyes. And the character, no matter what, is going to then tell them, "I don't believe you. I don't think that's true. Say it again. Say it again. Say it again."
Yeah, and exactly. So it's 2 and 2 is 5. 2 and 2 is 5. It's the same exact archetype of 1984.
Yeah.
If you don't believe what we're saying, if you say yes, we want no. You're not good enough. You got to believe that 2 and 2 makes 5.
And they gave
And
you a hint in one where the guy's blubbering and carrying on, so they're not going to let you out of the break room until you break. They're not going to let you out of the break room until you break.
Yep.
That's that. So the break room is called the break room for not relaxation, but it's meant to break you, and it does. And you're not allowed out of there until you get broken. Now, the wellness center is where you're sent to in lieu of or before the break room, and the wellness center is where you're quite made to mask your emotion. It's like if you remember Colonel Flagg from MASH, where he would never smile. He's like, I trained myself over 100 hours of watching the Three Stooges not to laugh. You know, he said I used a cattle.
Colonel Flagg was my favorite character in MASH. The CIA or whatever he was.
Everything and he would always jump out the window or the door and everything else.
It was Ed Winter. And now, interesting tie in though. So Ed Winter actually came, like he became typecast, I guess, from that show. But he came, all of a sudden, there was a show called Project Blue Book in the late 70s about the UFO.
Of course,
thing, right? And the original guy left, and then Ed Winter came in and was played, not the same character as Colonel Flagg, but he was Air Force guy going around interviewing UFO. So there's a big tie in there. You just brought it up.
Yeah, so that went from the early 50s to my birth year, 69, is when that got that little that Project Blue Book ran. Yeah. So then that was another one of those.
Roswell. That's Roswell. Big
tie-in for sure. Oh yeah, that all deals with that same idea of the idea of because most people who look into this will, like we talked about, on all these different so-called inventions coming out one after the other, all of which are moving towards the idea of communication and mass communication, and for a reason. The idea of getting the population all in tune with each other.
This is the Macy. Now, anyone that's listening to this, and it's going to be extremely hard to do. Let me just tell you now, the Macy conferences with Norbert Wiener, very strange name, in 49, I guess they started. The records of what they were discussing, and it's called the movement of humanity into a common denominator. They had a name, I forget the name, but it was like not trans something or other, but it was the Macy conferences were the mass mind control the planet. So
isn't that interesting about on the plane, the idea of transmission? Because from 27 you had the television transmission, in 27 you had the transatlantic telephone, in 47 you had the transistor. So then the trans idea is...
it was cybernetics, the whole process of cybernetics. And the most, thanks to Hollywood, we think of cybernetics to do with robots, but no, it's to do with the movement of the mass of humanity into a different common zone, which will feed
into a different mindset. And now, think of the idea of set mathematically is a collection of numbers, just like this.
The show.
The show's about. It's the idea, and they call them scary numbers. And when you see the scary numbers, I'll put up some slides when I do the video, just in the background. They're always surrounded by sevens.
You've got to get this video, this YouTube out there, because I'm telling you, this is. There's no one else doing this as good as this.
Let's go over a couple more things, and another character, which is the one played by Patricia Arquette, the manager of the Severed floor. Her name is Harmony Cabal. Now Harmony
Cabal.
What's interesting about Harmony is that Harmony sounds sweet. It sounds like a great idea. However, Harmony,
nasty.
It's very nefarious. And that was one of the characters. When I was watching their face, I'm like, there's more to this character. And then when the character shows up in Bard Creek as being the next door neighbor to Mark, you first think that, oh, that's they're out. They don't know each other because their minds separated. But you
Separated.
quickly realize that Harmony character does know where she's at.
Oh
She's
yeah,
existing in both places.
yeah.
Her name in outside in the outside world
Mrs.
is she's Miss Selvig.
Miss Selvig, yeah.
Now, what's interesting about Selvig is first you have Sel, but then what is a Vig? A Vig is a vigorish. That's attack. It's the idea of interest. So if you go to a loan shark or you're at a bet, you have a nut and a Vig. Now the nut's the idea of the original loan, but the Vig is the idea of the vigorish or the idea of interest. What's interest? The juice, the commission, the fee. You see? So then Selvig is the idea if you then produce work for this character that she is the bet. She is the one who's controlling the casino because that character, that manager is managing. To manage, you have to manage inside and outside, and you'll also notice that the character slinks around and is at
She
work
pretend,
sometimes and
and
is
yeah,
out.
always pretending to be friendly and
Yeah,
overly friendly, very
over,
overly
yeah,
friendly,
bringing cookies and also
very
over,
overly
yeah,
friendly.
bringing cookies. And also, did you notice that when she was mentioning to Mark when she invites herself over with cookies, she retells the story of Jesus. She says
No, I
that
didn't notice that.
she says her husband said that he was going away and he was going to make a place for her, but
I didn't even pick up that.
in the meantime, it has a guest house in the back for someone that basically that
Who's
she
pregnant,
could,
and
she,
she's pregnant. There's a
yeah,
pregnant woman involved
yeah,
in the story, Mark's sister, who's
yeah,
heavily pregnant. So there you got this Joseph character, Joseph Mary. So yeah, I
yeah,
didn't even pick up. So this is something you've picked up on that I never picked up on.
yeah, yeah. So then that's right in the and also when she's walking in for that scene, she looks up and she goes, "Oh, the third light is. Are you waiting for that third light to revive itself? The
Wow.
three, the three, the
Yeah.
G, the seven, the mind. Are you waiting for that mind to revive itself?" That's another way of
Mm,
saying it. Now,
mm.
so she basically says that she has a guest house, which means basically she's wanting Mark to go over and sing sweet nothings.
Yeah.
That's what that's talking about. But she retells that story. I found it. I was like, come on. I heard that. I was like, that's
Yeah. Yeah.
another way that they speak about Jesus. And also when they go to the the hall of statues, and their statues are a big thing now. I know in Australia they're doing statues of your PM.
Oh
They
yeah.
also do statues of in sports. They're putting statues of different sports players outside of the arenas now. So it's this
Yeah.
whole idea of this idea of statue, because if you remember some, just like the idea of a face on a coin, the only reason that George Washington exists in anyone's mind is that he's on the coin and the tinder.
Yeah.
Otherwise, nobody gives a shit. Nobody cares. But that if you're constantly reminded of someone, they then exist, and they only exist in the stories told or the stories remembered of that character, which is
Yeah.
simply just a character. I found that interesting as well. So
Well, this is a really important. This show I picked up. So again, I have not watched TV,
mhm.
a TV show for 10 years, at least, maybe longer. I've never sat there, but I picked up as soon as I started watching. I was going, "There's so much in this. This show is just giving out information, but only to the elite or the esoteric that can understand this kind of stuff, because it's going to go over their heads. It's going to be interesting to normie people. They're going to love the bits and pieces, but what you're pointing out is really heavy archetypes, really ancient symbolism,
Mhm.
and those numbers. I hadn't actually. I mean, I saw that the scary numbers thing,
Yeah.
and I thought that's interesting. I didn't actually pause it to watch those numbers up, but it's 311.
I knew
9/11.
what was going to be there. The 311, the 911, the 611,
Wow,
the
that's so amazing.
65, the 44, the 11. They're all
Yeah.
in there, all the different. And then guess what? Down the side when they're like as in a magic square, because you're dealing with the idea of 10 numbers total. You're dealing with 357, or the idea of 357. All right, that's
Yeah.
your three, your ring into your senses, into become your mind.
And
Where your mind
notice
is,
they
your
use
body
they use
follows.
notice they've always kept 357 in your head with Dirty Harry carrying a
Yep,
357 Magnum.
blow your head
It's
clean off.
off.
Or no,
So
didn't he say 40? Is that a 357 or a 44 Magnum?
yeah, he said 357. Or it was 40, 44 or 357. Either way, the 357
Yeah,
Magnum's one. I think it was Magnum Force. Mm.
yeah,
But
Magnum Force. That was one of the ones. That was a good one too. Although
and
if
it had
even if
David
you go
Soul.
back and watch some of those Dirty
It had
Harry movies,
it had David Soul, which is an interesting name as well.
yeah. If
In
you go
Magnum
back and
Force.
watch some of those Dirty Harry movies, a lot of them are pretty raunchy as well. And a
Well, the
lot of the
first one
movies he
certainly was.
did
The
back in
first
those
one was.
days.
The first one had a lot of implied
Oh yeah,
raunchiness in it. Yeah, for sure.
but and they kind of give the he's supposed to be. Yeah, it's so interesting how people get a reputation, but when you actually watch their work, it's like that's really not you know
Mm.
what the character
Oh,
presented. Now what's as a tie-in, just so you know, kind of where these characters come from. If you remember the Arquette character who's playing Harmony, who's playing the manager of the Severance floor, at least for the time I'm seeing it, Miss Selvig on the outside, she played Kristen Parker in Nightmare on Elm Street 3. Dream
exactly.
Warrior,
Dream Warrior, yeah, and she's
1987.
been in a lot of good movies. Well,
Yeah.
sorry, not good movies, but a lot of interesting movies. She was married to who was she married? She was married to what's his name? The nephew of the guy that did the Apocalypse Now. Um,
Uh,
Coppola. The
Nicolas Cage,
Nick Cage.
Thomas Jane.
She was married to him and Thomas Jane. And
Oh,
Thomas Jane was in a number of interesting shows as well.
uh-huh.
But she plays her character is, as soon as I've seen her face, and so they've used, whoever came up with the casting on the show, they've picked the best people they can possibly have to portray the imagery on the Severance show.
I want to see if they're all wearing red Kabbalah bracelets when they're not
In real
working.
life, I would say they
Yeah,
probably are. Yeah,
I'd say
I would
most
say
of them
they
because
probably are.
all of them have the tribal look. I'm just telling
Yeah.
they're all tribals. You know, the
I would say
Revelation
so, yeah.
types.
Well, that's where it fits in with this whole Seinfeld archetype.
Right.
You've got, and that, so yeah, so deep down subconsciously, it is 100% tribal.
Oh, before I forget, the Devon Scout Hale, which is Mark's sister, which you brought up, the
Yeah.
Jean Tulik lady who played that. She's then in the show. She's married to his Mark's brother-in-law is a self-help writer,
Yeah,
and
he's
the
he's like
self
a
yeah
character. He's like to me that his book that he's. That's where I kind of picked up the Scientology thing. That's like he's doing
mm-hmm,
this. Anyway,
mm-hmm. And also the idea, Rick, and kind of where it ties into the humor. That's
and notice their restaurants, they're always drinking water or something very
yeah,
clear. There's no
yeah,
colours in their
yeah,
drinks. It's just
yeah.
water. And you don't see
Yes,
food. I don't think you see food even. That's a really, apart from the cookies. You brought up the cookies before. But
and
they don't
those
seem to
weren't
be
even
eating anything.
those look like who knows what. Those look like horse pucky. They look like
Potentially,
horse
yeah.
puckies to me.
It may as
And,
well be.
yeah, and you'll notice that Mark's trying to choke one down. You know, he's
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
oh,
Yeah, so he's now, the actor that plays him, Adam Scott, was on Parks and Recreation. So I've never watched that show, but apparently my son, the youngest son, he knew all about Parks and Recreation. So it's very like The Office, the American version.
mm-hmm.
There's parts of that you can see. There's so many, archetypes, I guess, that are presented into this show. But you're going to have to watch the next. I think it's another 7 episodes, and then the next 5 episodes of the second series.
Uh-huh.
And we're going to have to. You're going to.
She also mentioned that her late husband was a carpenter before she told the story. Just
Funny
so,
that.
yeah, see how it all works
Christ,
out.
The Jesus Christ
Yeah.
well, it's not an archetype, but they're actually disguising
Yeah, they're just they're discussed because the truth and the life and the way out of this place, this hell, is through the Lord Jesus Christ. However, they're showing you this other place, which is hell, which is the idea, and it's presented as hell. That's what it is, but it's being shown to you as Lumen, a company, instead of the idea of Lumen, the actual world right now. The place, where everybody's sitting right now. That this is hell. This is Lumen, because everything that we talked about.
We discussed this last week.
Yeah, because everything we talked about from the Bell Labs is not being presented inside the company; it's being presented and used outside for mass communications at this very moment, and that's the way we're talking right now.
Yeah.
So it's the idea of being as wise as a serpent, right? You can be a serpent, right? You can be as wise as a serpent. Otherwise, how can you then help people out if you don't know what you're talking about, or if you don't know, which is the absolute worst thing for anyone to say, because silence is preferable. If you don't know, just be quiet. That's it.
Yeah. Shut up.
Yeah, just be quiet. Just talk about, okay, what do you know? Because I can spend all day with people who don't know anything. I don't want to do that. It's like, what do you know? Tell me what you did. I also, before we kind of head out, I wanted to talk about the anagrams in Severance. Not only do you have the 7 in the word severance, but the idea of you have effence, or effence. It's hard to say, but EVANESCE, the idea of dissipating like a vapor, the idea of a fleeting image, the idea of a thought forgotten. Also, cravines, or caverns, and veneers. So you have caverns, which is the idea of caves, or dark caverns, which is the idea of caves or dark kind of gashes or gaps, which really are quite ominous sounding. And you also have veneers, which are covering up corruption, or veneers are covering up nasty ass teeth.
Yeah.
So you get a cover. So you see that even within the idea of severance, you have which is the idea of to separate completely, which is already proving to be a lie because of just the way that the Selvig character operates on both sides of the fence, and the obvious fact that the assistant manager, Seth Milchick, he also has external knowledge of both sides, as well as the security chief character.
Yeah, and he's uncannily, to me, as a 60-year-old now, sadly.
Mm-hmm.
I remember watching Mission Impossible back in early 70s. He is uncannily like, look at what he looks like. There's a character in the second series of Mission Impossible with Jim Phelps. There was a character called Greg. And he looks just like Greg from Mission Impossible, who was now I have to go back and start looking back in those episodes, because I went from the very original series through. There's a lot of stuff in Mission Impossible.
You're talking Greg Morris.
Greg Morris, the actor. That looked to me, that's Milchick. It could be the same guy, time traveling and playing the same character. Well, not the same character, but very interesting.
I feel what you're saying. Yeah, he's very similar looking. That's for sure. Very similar looking.
That's what he reminds me of. Dave, this show is the best. I always say the last one was better than the one before. The newest one's better than the one before we just did. I do believe in my gut instinct that we're going to break down the show. You're the one really, really hitting those home runs here. but it's just it's relevant. It's on TV. If you've got Apple TV, you have to pay for it, or you can probably pirate it. I guess there's ways of doing that. 3 episodes are good. You wait till you see the rest of the series, and then there was a gap of 2 to 3 years before they brought out the one that's coming out right now every Friday afternoon or Friday morning. Probably a 9/11, I would guess.
Yeah, I would say they're bringing that out, Rick, because one, I would say most people are. This is going to fly over most people's head because if you're not paying attention to kind of what's being shown to you, it's going to seem a bit slow to get going. But everything at the beginning is important to notice.
Yeah,
absolutely. Because you have to then, because nothing's kind of in a show that's an hour or even less by the time it's been cut up. Everything's put in for a reason. There's very little wasted space.
Well,
right? So then
I'm going to just give you some hints, and I won't no spoilers, but you're going to see what would be the best way to describe it? The imagery of Baphomet or Baphomet,
yeah,
big time towards the end. You're going to see all sorts of stuff, and you're going to discover. And there's no surprise what you thought you're going to see.
Yeah.
But there's no. The good thing I do like the show because there's no graphic sex. There's no. It's totally. There's swear words in it for the you're watching it with your children. But
and they overdid they overdid the character at the beginning. What's his nuts? Mark's ex workmate, the one who's kind of decoupled himself.
Okay. So that's
they kind of Petey. They kind of overdid the Petey bit, but you'll get the point.
Yeah, and so all kind of with the show, they've committed to 5 series of this. There's 5 series been committed to. At the moment, I do believe just from word of mouth, people are going, you should watch this show. If you're working, particularly if you work in an office, you're going to suddenly go, what am I doing when I walk in the door here? Am I conforming to? And yes, you are. Yes, you are. You won't move up the ranks if you don't conform, and that's what this shows. This guaranteed.
And here's the thing about Irving. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Rick.
No, you go. Please,
I was going to mention where I see Irving going. Not only like the idea of the relationship with Bert, we already talked about, but the Irving character is such a hardcore company character. I see him turning 180.
Yeah, well, guess what? You I will say this. You're right. You discover his outies. So he was in the Navy or his father. But you're not sure it was his father or him. Was a very committed Navy man. So you'll be able to identify there. You'll be able to.
So that's quite.
So, but you can't tell if it's his medals or his father's medals that he's always looking at. So you're going to see that in the next 2 episodes.
Let me tell you how I left the Navy. I was on the fantail of the destroyer DD-971 David R. Ray in Long Beach, California, and they came out to me. The yeoman came out to me, and he says, "Hey, Johnson." I said, "Yep." And I said, "I guess I'm getting out." So then that it wasn't even 2 days later. I got my ticket. I walked off the ship. I took my sea bag, which is where you put all your stuff. I took my sea bag and I chucked it right into the dumpster. Wow. And I walked off the base. That's how I left the Navy.
Yep, and went straight into computers. Yeah,
I went right up to San Jose, and I went to a Western Digital had an open house at the time. An open house, which is, they call that when you go in and you drop off your resume.
Yeah.
They were having a local hotel, a conference center. So I rolled in there almost at the end of the period. Some of the tables were closing up, and I went to the guy at Western Digital, and I gave him my resume. I was asking him if he was looking for anybody. He's like, we need somebody in texture maintenance. And I said, I can do that. I had no idea what he was talking about. So So what it turned out to be was those were the machines that you have platters in a hard drive.
Yeah.
And that hold the data. Well, what happens at the beginning is they get put on a texturing machine, and through what's called a diamond dust slurry, they get prepped
Polished.
or yeah
Polished.
they get basically scratched in a way, or textured is what they claim. And it gets textured, and then that then goes into and goes into what's called a sputtering. It gets different metal layers put onto it so that it can hold a charge. So then,
Yep.
long story short, I went from that into semiconductor. Then I went into read-write head manufacturing, which I did photolithography and sputter vacuum, which is a completely different. Photolithography is the idea of printing. It's how you take a print. So let's say you can make a mask the size of an 8 by 10 piece of paper. All right. That's how big your mask is. However, you reduce it through a series of lenses down to the size of a postage stamp. The
Wow.
reason you do that is because it's easier to draw lines and dimensions on a big piece of paper. Think of it just, and then reduce that down, because that then allows more detail. The more detail, the more transistors, the more ideas and pathways, the faster processing gets, the faster computers get. So it allows more detail. The more detail, the more transistors, the more ideas and pathways, the faster processing gets, the faster computers get. So then the thing is, in this whole process, there's two there's two what's called bottlenecks. One is the size of the line that you can make, and that gets corrected, or it gets adjusted by what type of light you use, all the way down to X-ray. But then also the idea of heat dispersion is because uh, when you create any activity that is moving, that idea creates heat. So heat dissipation in computing is one of your biggest obstacles to running a computer, and that's why speed is determined by how quickly you can discharge heat from the processing surface, whether it be through a heat sink, or through glycol liquid cooling, or through different process, even colder processes than that, like cryo tubing, things like that. So all that process is meant for one reason and one reason only, and that is to remove the heat from the process. The more heat you can remove, the faster you can process.
Wow.
So that I got into all that, and I did that for quite a long time. And then, of course, I got into my own business after that, which was my cannabis business, my one-man
Oh,
show.
fascinating. And so everyone,
Yeah,
again,
yeah,
truthmeats.com. If you want to listen
yeah,
to some great shows,
yeah.
truthmeats.com, the Bongversations, 1 to 22.
Bongversations.
1 to 22. And you're going to hear, go backwards. Don't go forward. You can go any direction you want, but
Yeah.
you're going to listen to some really good stuff that's on there. And otherwise, it's on YouTube. And so far, you haven't been taken down by the sound of it.
No, we keep it pretty easy on use language that they don't even that confuses them.
Oh, no, this show is, as someone said the other day, I think it was Buzzing Free, he said, there's no egos on the show, and it's 100%
Yeah.
true. But I would say
Yeah.
between me and you, our egos are probably up there with some of the biggest egos ever. But I drop it at the door. I walk
Yeah.
out and I do my it's like Severance. I walk in and my eyes roll back, and I leave my ego at the front door.
Right.
I come in to listen to you and add a little bit of stuff every now and then, but
Right.
I'm more than happy. We'll wrap it up now, because I
Sure.
think that's 3 episodes, and you've really, really done some good stuff, Dave. I'm going to have to give you the famous 12 out of 10 Frank the Salt Guy.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So if you want to send so episode 25.
Sure, I will send it out. All right. Be blessed, everybody.
Be blessed. Be really blessed, and do yourselves a favor and watch Severance. If you have to, pirate it, do it. If you have to watch it legally, do it. But some good stuff, and I know for a fact there's going to be more than one episode about Severance coming up.
Yeah, we'll
So,
we'll do some. We'll split it up. Next week we'll do something different. Then the following
yeah,
week I'll be ready to come back and do more.
excellent, man.
Keep it easy.
Excellent,
All right, let's send
excellent,
out the
dude.
bot. See you, everybody.